I'm a game show junkie. I've been one since I was a child. Sure, the television viewing of my early years did have the usual notable cartoons of the 80s that were beloved by Facebook pages for Gen Xers. He-Man, Transformers, The Real Ghostbusters, and such. Over the past 5 decades, if I haven't been watching sports ball, movies, YouTube videos, or other shows that either I got into or my wife had gotten me into, I was watching game shows. I watched so many game shows in my youth that my dad would tease me about it. He would tell me that watching too many game shows would turn my brain into oatmeal. He should have told my stepmother that. Nearly every other Friday night I was there to visit, Jeopardy was on without fail. I've decided to make a top 10 list of my favorite MCs that made a mark in my decades of watching game shows. This isn't a general consensus. These are people I remembered well as hosts of the game shows I watched on a constant basis and will make me say, I liked what they did for that show. When he was not paving the way for the rock and roll craze on American Bandstand or being part of my New Year's Eve countdown in my teenage years, I fondly remember Dick Clark being the host of the Insert Huge Dollar Amount Pyramid Show in the 1980s, a show Clark began hosting in the 1970s. It was one of the game shows that I saw the host hold a serious mood on the show. Sure, there were jokes and funny moments, but Clark would bring the show under control in a hurry, especially during the Pyramid's huge tournaments or if one of the contestants were in the winner's circle going for the $100,000 prize. This was a show I watched a lot with my mom growing up. I also watched it a lot during my teenage years and early years of fatherhood on USA and Game Show Network reruns respectively. Clark would win 3 daytime Emmys for Best Game Show Host while hosting the Pyramid. After he stopped hosting the Pyramid, I would enjoy his energy as he counted down the seconds to ring in the new year on his annual New Year's Rockin' Eve show. Clark passed away in 2012 at the age of 82. I was introduced to this television matchmaker when he was the host of a game show version of the tedious crossword game Scrabble. I did watch Woolery on Love Connection at a younger age, even though I had no idea what was going on. The show was about dating, a concept my single-digit age brain didn't grasp yet. I just waited for the audience vote because of the digital numbers. I would have an on and off viewership with the original Wheel of Fortune host during his run of the Game Show Network original show Lingo in the 2000s and his Blunt Force Truth YouTube channel in the 2010s. In November 2024, Woolery passed away at the age of 83. After researching Jim Lang for this video, he deserves to be on this list regardless of the fond 80s memories I had of him. He was the original matchmaker as the first host of the dating game in the 60s and 70s. I had after-school memories of Lang hosting a high-stakes version of Name That Tune and watching reruns of Bullseye on the USA Network. But the show I'll always remember Lang in the most would be a show so tense that I watched it every night. I even got the home version of it for Christmas during the show's run, the $1 million Chance of a Lifetime. This was like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but not as memorable. But I tuned into that show every night just to see if one of those married couples would win the million. Lang worked in the Bay Area on a handful of radio stations before retiring from broadcasting in 2005. Lang died of a heart attack in 2014 at the age of 81. Near the end of his career in the mid-1980s, I really liked Bill Cullen and his gentle old man energy. Not only was he a game show wanderer, but a yinzer who got to call a few Pittsburgh Steelers games in the late 1930s to begin his career. It wasn't until the 1950s where he solidified his role as a game show host. Before Bob Barker or Drew Carey, Cullen was the first host of The Price is Right. I remember watching Cullen in the mid-80s hosting a whole plethora of game shows I enjoyed watching before he retired in 1986. Blockbusters, Chain Reaction, Hot Potato, and long before Snoop D.O. Double G would host the 2010s revival, The Joker's Wild. He even did a syndicated version of the $25,000 Pyramid while Dick Clark was doing the CBS network version. Cullen would have hosted the revival of The Price is Right that's still going to this very day. But due to a bout of polio early in his life that affected his ability to walk or stand for long periods of time, he couldn't take the job. Cullen died of lung cancer in 1990 at 70. While he hosted shows that never took off, such as the game show Hitman and, wait, this can't be right. He was a co-anchor on the Playboy channel. Anyway, before Effie Trinket hosted the show in the 2020s, Peter Tomarken made an impression in my youth, encouraging contestants in the 1980s to avoid that cash and prize-stealing whammy on Press Your Luck. While hosting the show, he oversaw one of the biggest game show scandals in 1984. Michael Larson figured out the big board and racked up a whole lot of money in the second round of a typical Friday morning before The Price is Right came on. Larson's streak ran for so many spins that the taping of the show had to be broken up into 2 parts, with the second half airing on a Monday. While Tomarken made a cameo appearance in a spin-off revival of Press Your Luck called Whammy, I really didn't see Tomarken in anything else after that. Well, there was an infomercial in the 90s he was on when he interviewed relationship expert Ellen Creedman. No, I never read Light His Fire, but I am now curious about it. Sadly, in 2006, Tomarken along with his wife were killed in a small plane crash from Santa Monica to San Diego. You're probably scratching your head wondering why I have this legend in the middle of the list. That's because I have fonder memories of the next 4, but I will give top marks to the man who had hosted Jeopardy from the show's beginning to his own end. He was part of many people's evenings for 4 decades as host of this reverse quiz show. He was even part of my evenings off and on. There was a period of time I'd watch Jeopardy with my daughter every night in her first few years. There were other shows I remember Trebek hosting in between watching contestants going all in on a daily double. One in particular was the revival of classic Concentration in the late 80s and early 90s, a game of memory that involved winning cash, prizes, cars, and solving rebus puzzles. Trebek taught me a lot of vocabulary words in my youth when Jeopardy first aired, and he used those words on a frequent basis. No doubt about it, that show pretty much made me a little smarter. Trebek is among game show legends, even if I didn't rank him as high on my list. He continued to carry himself as a television dignitary during his fight with pancreatic cancer. In one of the many phrases I learned from him, the cancer wound up taking his life in November of 2020. While Dick Clark was known for more being in the music industry than being a game show host, Winston Wink Martindale was known for the opposite. Early in his career, Wink was involved in the music industry, hosting as a radio DJ in Tennessee. He even had a spoken word song chart rather high on the Billboard Hot 100. Martindale hosted a show on Memphis television called Wink Martindale's Dance Party. One of his guests on the show was a friend of his named Elvis Presley. Martindale would get into hosting game shows in the 70s, and it was during my early childhood in the 80s that I was introduced to his friendly demeanor on Tic-Tac-Dough. After hosting TTD for 8 years, Wink wanted to create his own shows. One show he created and produced with Merv Griffin was another show I watched a lot during its short run, Headline Chasers. When I started getting the USA Network, I would see Wink on the revival of High Rollers, a high-stakes version of the dice game Shut the Box. I would also tune into a show Wink created for Canadian television called Bumper Stumpers. Even after the 80s ended, Wink would still be involved in television or radio in some way, shape, or form. Whether it would be shows like Trivial Pursuit or Debt in the 90s, or being recognized for his body of work in the 2000s, such as getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2006. There's no sad end to this segment. As of writing and recording this video, Wink is now in his 90s and still alive. In my youth, I watched Family Feud being hosted by the likes of Richard Dawson and Ray Combs. I'm not even going to mention the guy from Baskets, Al from Home Improvement, King Neptune from SpongeBob SquarePants, or Al Roker. I'm sure they did well, but I never looked at the show when those 4 had the job. But in the 2010s, my wife and I had spent many evenings watching the feud hosted by one of the original kings of comedy, Steve Harvey. When Harvey hosted the show, guaranteed there would be at least one moment per round that made us laugh out loud, whether it be his on-the-fly jokes or the many facial expressions he made after hearing a contestant blurt out a desperate yet ridiculous response. After a lot of exposure to the mayhem of the feud with Harvey hosting the show since 2010, I had to take those nostalgia goggles off my face and acknowledge something. With all of his accolades, books, and talk shows, Steve Harvey will go down as the greatest host to say those 2 words during the Fast Money round.
Survey said, "Oh my gosh, he got..."
While he had a long distinguished career in television and radio, Gene Rayburn will always be known to me as the man who hosted blank. When I first watched the old match game from the 70s and 80s as a youngster, The music and filling in the blank was all I knew. As I got older and my mom got satellite TV in 2000, I would get sucked into the game show network. I would binge watch Match Game reruns and really appreciate Rayburn's ability to put up with a lot of tomfoolery on a show-by-show basis, especially with Brett Somers and Charles Nelson Riley sitting next to each other on the top row, like a pair of class clowns causing most of the hilarity. Some of my favorite moments while watching Gene host Match Game was when he would join in on the mischief and fun, talking to Earl, who ran the Super Match board, fighting with the cameramen, running a lap around the studio. There was the occasional chaos when someone had won the Super Match prize. One incident involved a contestant kissing the author of Fried Green Tomatoes, Fanny Flagg, a few times too many after matching her answer for $5,000. I bet the people who attended the tapings of that show walked out saying, "I went to a game show and a chaotic comedic cavalcade broke out." With apologies to Alec Baldwin, who hosted the revival of the show in the 21st century, Rayburn still remains the best host for that show, even when he was sharing the spotlight with Bowser from Sha-Na-Na on the short-lived Match Game and Hollywood Squares Hour. Rayburn passed away in 1999 from blank. Before I get to number 1, I did have a few honorable mentions as hosts, such as Jim Perry, Bob Eubanks, and Richard Dawson, but I wanted to pay tribute to the unsung hero of the game show, because even as a youth, I had a literal handful of favorites for this title: the announcer. As I got older and having watched enough episodes of Futurama, hearing Stewart's voice during old episodes of Sale of the Century gave me a chuckle. It's as if I was hearing a slight variation of Bender.
Stand by to see John play for all the prizes, plus a cash jackpot, a total of $131,933. Okay, we won't eat you. Do I preach to you when you're lying stoned in the gutter? No. So beat it.
This gentle voice began his career with Dick Clark on American Bandstand, announced the Barry and Enright game shows in the 80s, and ended his days with Vanna White, Pat Sajak, and That Huge Wheel. When he wasn't introducing legends like Eubanks on Card Sharks or Trebek on Classic Concentration, Wood would introduce many families and got them ready for action during the Dawson Coombs era of Family Feud. With respect to Johnny Olson, Come On Down is on Rod Roddy's tombstone as the longtime announcer of The Price is Right. I first heard his high energy and saw his flashy suits when he was announcing for Press Your Luck. An absolute master of the microphone for almost 8 decades. If there was a game show I've seen in my lifetime, chances are Johnny Gilbert had been the announcer for it. Like Roddy was known for Come On Down, Gilbert has been known for those 3 words he's been saying at the beginning of a certain game show for over 40 years.
This is Jeopardy!
And now, here's number 1. You can pull out any synonyms meaning distinguished, and they would all be understatements for Bob Barker. Never mind that his first game show job lasted nearly 20 years with Truth or Consequences. Forget that he got into a fist fight with Adam Sandler and Happy Gilmore. With the exception of a week in 1974 due to illness, Barker hosted the reboot of The Price is Right for 35 years, from the beginning of the show's return in 1972 to his retirement in 2007. This guy was a welcome sight when I was homesick from school for a week during my freshman year of high school. While I never tuned in to The Price is Right on a daily basis, I tuned in whenever I was bored or sick at around 10 a.m. on an idle Tuesday. In 35 years of hosting the show, he endured anything the show threw at him. Game malfunctions,
The price is $6.80. She has $6.50, but we're desperate. Give her the laugh. And the
broken
second
wheels,
flash is that the beeper, you know how the wheel beep, 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 beep? It's broken. But I told them that the audience can beep for us, can't you? All right, now you're going to spin first, Sean. When it starts spinning, you start beeping. Go.
To my mom, my other sister, to my co-workers, to all my fan club, to everyone across Michigan.
Look, you got 90 cents. You know, I I think we can disconnect that mechanical beeper. This is wonderful. It brings everybody together, you see?
Contestants injuring themselves from overexcitement of the prospect of winning a car,
Are you all right? Yeah. You sure? Yeah. You turn your ankle or your knee? You hurt your knee? You're higher than 4. His knee went out here. $8,602, a difference of $2,602. You win, Ali.
contestants fainting after winning their showcase, and lots and lots and lots of kisses. This man was the Johnny Carson of game shows. Johnny Olson, Rod Roddy, and Rich Fields were his Ed McMahons. When he ran the show with his gooseneck microphone, he didn't simply get down to brass tacks during the show. He would occasionally take his time and would get to know the many winners and losers on the show. He would also acknowledge the many people working behind the scenes as well. Barker was a jack of all trades in what he did on The Price is Right. Part game show host, part talk show host, part comedian, part activist. I can go on further about this luminary of not only game shows, but of television as a whole. I know that Drew Carey has done an upstanding job filling Barker's shoes since 2007, but he'll never come close to the real deal. Barker came up a few months short of reaching 100, passing away in the summer of 2023. Who do you have as favorites? Leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching, and remember,
Help